The air inside Driftport 9 tasted of ozone-recycled sweat, and the metallic tang of a peace treaty that was barely worth the datapad it was written on. It was a space station caught in the throat of the galaxy, a neutral zone where the Terran Coalition and the Phalid Imperium rubbed shoulders without technically being allowed to unsheathe their claws. To Adrian Hart, it just looked like a very expensive cage. He sat at the edge of the bar in the Neon Aquarium, a lounge that spanned the border of the two sectors. The lighting was a headache-inducing mix of bioluminescent blues and harsh sodium oranges. Above the bar, a massive tank filled with void eels cast shifting serpentine shadows across the patrons. "You are brooding again," Jax Morrow said, sliding a glass of synth whiskey toward Adrian. "You have that look, the one that says you are calculating the structural integrity of everyone's jawbone." Adrian ignored the drink. He was watching the other side of the room, the Phalid side. They moved differently than humans. Fluid silent, radiating a kind of coiled kinetic energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. They were tall, bipedal, covered in short, dense fur that ranged from obsidian black to snow leopard patterns. Their uniforms were sharp, militaristic, and intimidatingly pristine. "I am not brooding," Adrian said, his voice low. "I am observing." "Observing," Jax snorted. He was a mechanic grease permanently etched into his fingerprints, and he possessed a mouth that moved faster than his survival instincts. "Right. You are observing the fact that we are sitting in the most expensive dive bar in the sector, and you are still thinking about the war." "The war ended 5 years ago, Jax." "Tell that to your face," Jax replied, taking a swig of his own drink. "Look, Adrian, we are on leave. You are supposed to be relaxing. You are supposed to be forgetting that you are a xenopsychology cadet, with a chip on his shoulder the size of a dreadnought." Adrian turned his gaze back to his friend. "It is not a chip, Jax. It is a memory." "Mara," Jax said, the humor vanishing for a second. "I know." "She did not just vanish," Adrian said, his fingers tightening around the untouched glass. "Patrol 4 did not just disappear into a nebula. The Phalids know what happened. They have always known. This treaty, it is just paint over rust." Jax sighed, realizing he could not win this specific battle tonight. He looked around the room, desperate for a distraction, and his eyes landed on a figure sitting in the far corner of the Phalid section. The figure was alone. That in itself was rare. Phalids usually moved in packs or prides. But this one sat in a high-backed booth, illuminated by the slow pulse of the neon lights. She was dressed in the deep charcoal uniform of a high-ranking officer, the silver piping catching the light. Her fur was a sleek, solid black, absorbing the shadows around her, and her eyes were terrifyingly bright gold, slit-pupilled and unblinking. She was reading a holographic scroll, her gloved finger swiping through ancient data with bored precision. "Whoa," Jax whispered. "Do you see her?" Adrian did not need to look. He had felt her presence the moment she walked in 10 minutes ago. "I see her." "That is Admiral Sable Ravel," Jax said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "The white ghost of the Antares campaign. Although ironically she is black as void space. They say she once held a blockade line for 3 weeks with a single damaged cruiser." "I know who she is," Adrian said coldly. "She is the one who signed the ceasefire for their side. She is the reason we are pretending to be friends." Jax grinned, a mischievous glint entering his eyes. He leaned in his elbow, knocking against the table. "I have a proposition, a wager. 50 credits says you cannot go over there and get a reaction out of her." Adrian looked at Jax with disdain. "I am not interested in your games." 100 credits, Jax pressed. "Come on. You are a xenopsychology student. Analyze her. Break the ice. Hell, I will give you 200 credits if you can get her to let you kiss her hand. 300 if you kiss her cheek." The air around Adrian seemed to drop a few degrees. He turned fully to Jax, his expression hard. "She is not a trophy, Jax," Adrian said, his voice cutting through the ambient thrum of the bass music. "And I am not a court jester. My sister is gone. My father is buried in his work because he cannot face the empty room in our house. And that woman over there, she represents the machine that ground my family into dust. I do not want to kiss her. I do not want to talk to her. I want to know where she buried the bodies." Jax recoiled slightly, hands raised in surrender. Okay, bad joke. Forget I said it. Bad joke. "I am not doing it," Adrian stated, his voice final. "I will not turn my hatred into a parlor trick for your amusement." The conversation should have ended there, but the acoustics in the neon aquarium were strange, designed to carry the whisper of deals and betrayals. Or perhaps Felid hearing was simply far superior to what the textbooks claimed. Across the room, 30 feet away, Admiral Sable Ravel stopped scrolling. Her ears tufted and sharp twitched once. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her head. Her golden eyes locked onto Adrian's across the smoky expanse of the bar. It was like being caught in the sights of a sniper rifle. There was no confusion in her gaze, no curiosity, just absolute predatory focus. She stood up. The movement was so smooth, it looked like liquid pouring upward. She was tall, easily 6'5", towering over most of the humans in the room. The chatter in the bar died down instantly as she stepped out of her booth. The Felid officers at nearby tables stiffened, bowing their heads in deference, but she ignored them. She walked in a straight line toward Adrian. She did not swagger. She glided her boots, making no sound on the metal floor. The crowd parted for her like water. Jax went pale. "Oh, Void. Adrian, I think she heard you." Adrian did not flinch. He remained seated, turning his stool to face her, his muscles locking into a fight-or-flight readiness that he forced into stillness. Sable stopped 2 feet from him. Up close, she was terrifyingly beautiful. The structure of her face was angular alien, yet mesmerizing, and the scent radiating from her was cold, like ozone and crushed mint. Her eyes were pools of molten gold, and the vertical pupils dilated slightly as she looked down at him. "You refused the wager," she said. Her voice was a low contralto, vibrating with a purr that sounded like a heavy engine idling. It was perfect standard English, devoid of any accent. Adrian met her gaze, refusing to look away. "I did." She tilted her head, a microscopic movement. 200 credits to kiss my hand. 300 for the cheek. And you refused." "I am not a gambler," Adrian said, his voice steady, though his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "And you are not a prize." A corner of her mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. It might have been a snarl. "I accept your refusal," she said. The words hung in the air, sharp as a scalpel. Before Adrian could process the syntax, she moved. Her hand, gloved in black leather, shot out and gripped his upper arm. It was not an aggressive strike, but the strength behind it was undeniable. It was the grip of something that could crush steel if it chose to. "Come with me," she commanded. "Hey!" Jax started to stand up, his loyalty overriding his terror. "You cannot just—" Sable did not even look at him. She simply flicked her tail, the tip thrashing once, and a low growl resonated in her throat. Jax sat back down, his survival instincts finally winning. "I am not arresting him," Sable said to the room at large. "I am educating him." She pulled Adrian off the stool. He stumbled, then found his footing, his anger flaring. "Let go of me." "Walk," she said, leaning close to his ear. "Unless you want to cause a diplomatic incident in front of 30 witnesses. Walk, Cadet Hart." She knew his name. A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning ran down his spine. Adrian clamped his jaw shut and walked. She led him out of the bar, not toward the brig or the docking bays, but toward the lift. The ride was silent and suffocating. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, staring at the floor indicators. Adrian watched her reflection in the polished metal doors. She looked tired. Not physically exhausted, but anciently weary, like a statue that had weathered too many storms. The doors opened on the observation deck. It was deserted at this hour, 2 in the morning ship time. The entire ceiling was a dome of reinforced glass, looking out into the vast, star-dusted emptiness of the drift. The starlight here was thin and sharp, cutting shadows across the floor. Sable walked to the railing and looked out at the nebula that swirled in the distance, a bruise of purple and gold against the black. "Why do you hate us?" she asked. She did not turn around. Adrian rubbed his arm where she had gripped him. "Is that a rhetorical question, Admiral?" "No. I want the specific variable. Is it the war? Is it the aesthetic, or is it simply that we remind you that you are not the apex predator in this galaxy?" Adrian walked up beside her, keeping a safe distance. "It is not about biology. It is about arrogance. You talk about honor and tradition, but you bomb civilian transports. You claim to value strength, but you prey on the weak." Sable turned to face him, leaning her hip against the railing. The starlight turned her black fur into a silhouette, leaving only those burning eyes visible. "And humans. You claim to value peace, yet you build weapons capable of cracking planets. You claim to value truth, but you lie to yourselves every day." "My sister," Adrian said the words slipping out before he could stop them. "Mara Hart. She was on a relief ship, unarmed. Your Third Fleet vaporized it." Sable's expression did not change, but her ears flattened slightly against her skull. "The Third Fleet was under the command of Archon Rook. He does not believe in relief ships." "And you serve him." "I serve the Imperium," she corrected. "And the Imperium is a complex beast, Adrian Hart. Just as your coalition is." "That is a convenient excuse." "It is a reality," she snapped, her voice rising for the first time. "I have held the line against total annihilation for 10 years. I have signed treaties with ink that was still wet with the blood of my kin. Do not speak to me of convenience. You see a monster because it is easier than seeing a soldier." Adrian stared at her. He wanted to shout, to throw his grief in her face, but her intellect was a wall he could not smash through. She was not denying the atrocities. She was contextualizing them, which was somehow more infuriating. "So, why am I here?" Adrian asked, his voice cold. "Did you drag me up here to debate ethics? Or did you just want to see the human squirm?" Sable pushed herself off the railing. She moved into his personal space, invading it with a casual dominance that made his breath hitch. She was taller than him, and she used every inch of that height. "You refused the bet," she said softly. "You said you did not want to turn pain into a game. That intrigued me. Most humans I meet are loud drunk and desperate to prove they are not afraid. You are afraid. But you are also furious. That is a potent combination." She was too close. He could see the individual flecks of amber in her irises. He could see the faint, pale scar running down her left cheek. "What do you want?" Adrian whispered. "I want to know if you are worth saving," she said enigmatically. And then she lunged. Adrian flinched, expecting a strike, a blow to the throat. But her hands came up to cup his face. Her claws sheathed her leather gloves cool against his skin. She pulled him down, tilting his head to the side. It was not a kiss. She buried her face in the curve of his neck. He felt the wet warmth of her mouth and then pain. Sharp, blinding, absolute pain. She bit him. It wasn't a nip. It was a puncture. Her fangs, reinforced with nanoceramics, sank deep into the muscle and vein where the neck meets the shoulder. Adrian cried out, his knees buckling, but she held him up, her arm like an iron bar around his waist. Fire flooded his system. It wasn't just blood loss. It was something else. He felt a surge of foreign energy, a liquid heat that raced through his arteries, seeking his heart, his brain, his very nervous system. It felt like being electrocuted and frozen at the same time. His vision whited out. The stars above spun into streaks of light. He tried to push her away, but his arms felt like lead. He was paralyzed, locked in her grip, held against the hard wall of her chest. She held on for 5 seconds. 5 seconds that felt like 5 years. And then she released him. Adrian slumped to the floor, gasping for air, his hand flying to his neck. It came away wet with blood, but the bleeding was already slowing the wound, sealing itself with unnatural speed. He looked up at her, through a haze of gray fog. Sable stood over him, wiping a trace of his blood from her lip with her thumb. Her eyes were glowing brighter now, pulsing with a rhythmic luminescence. "Why?" he wheezed. Sable knelt down, her face inches from his. The coldness was gone from her voice, replaced by something intense, possessive, and terrifying. "The perihelion is coming," she whispered. "And Archon Rook plays a game you do not know the rules to. Now you are part of the board." She reached out and brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. The touch was shockingly gentle. "Do not die, Adrian," she murmured. "I hate wasting brave people." The darkness rushed in from the edges of his vision. The last thing he saw was the starlight reflecting in her golden eyes, indifferent and beautiful. Then everything went black. Waking up was a process of assembling shattered pieces of reality. First came the smell. It wasn't the ozone of the station. It was sterile air, metallic and crisp, with an underlying scent of antiseptic and cinnamon. No, not cinnamon. Something muskier. Then came the sound. The deep, rhythmic thrum of a massive engine core. A heartbeat made of fusion and steel. Finally, the pain. It throbbed in his neck, a dull ache that synchronized with his pulse. Every time his heart beat, a little jolt of electricity seemed to pull at a wire that ran straight to the center of his chest. Adrian opened his eyes. He was in a room he did not recognize. The walls were dark gray matte metal, absorbing the low light. There were no windows. He was lying on a medical cot, but it wasn't the standard Coalition white mesh. It was a solid slab of black polymer that contoured to his body. He tried to sit up. The room spun, then steadied. "Careful," a voice said. "Your neural pathways are currently being rewired. Sudden movements might result in you forgetting how to use your legs for 10 minutes. Adrian blinked, focusing on the figure standing by a holographic console. It was a Felid, but smaller than Sable. Much smaller. She was perhaps 5'4", with fur the color of rusted copper and large, expressive ears that swiveled toward him. She wore a chaotic mix of a medical tunic and an engineer's utility belt. "Who are you?" Adrian croaked. His voice sounded like he had swallowed gravel. "Piper Wren," the Felid said, not looking up from her screen. "Chief Bioengineer, Temporary Medic, and the person currently preventing your immune system from rejecting the foreign nanites in your bloodstream. You are welcome, by the way." Adrian touched his neck. There was a bandage there, a small hexagonal patch. "What did she do to me?" Piper turned, leaning against the console. She had a datapad in one hand and a half-eaten nutrient bar in the other. "Admiral Ravel gave you a fang mark. In the old days, pre-space flight, it was a way of claiming a mate or a high-value prisoner, usually both. It creates a bioquantum link between the biter and the bitten." Adrian stared at her. "A link? Yep," Piper popped the P. "You are basically a Bluetooth speaker, and she is the phone. If she gets hurt, you feel it. If you get too far away from her, you feel pain. If she dies, well, let us not test that one yet. The feedback loop would probably scramble your brain like an egg." "This is insane." Adrian swung his legs off the cot. "This is slavery. I am a Coalition cadet. I have rights." "You have a mark on your neck that says you are the property of a High Admiral of the Felid Imperium," Piper said, taking a bite of her bar. "Legal jurisdiction gets a little fuzzy when ancient biology is involved. Also, you are on the flagship Voidstalker. We left Driftport 9 2 hours ago." "Turn the ship around," Adrian demanded, standing up. His legs wobbled, but he held his ground. Piper laughed. It was a chirping, bird-like sound. "I just fixed the plumbing and the people human. I do not steer the boat." Before Adrian could respond, the door to the medical bay hissed open. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Piper straightened up, hiding the nutrient bar behind her back. Two guards in full combat armor stepped in, flanking a massive figure. He was huge. If Sable was a panther, this man was a saber-toothed tiger, built of granite and cruelty. His fur was striped gray, and white shorn close to the skin in military fashion. He wore a cape of heavy synthweave, and his chest was adorned with medals that looked like jagged pieces of bone. Archon Malachi Rook. Adrian had seen his face on news feeds, usually accompanied by death counts. Seeing him in person was like standing next to a nuclear reactor with a leak. The Archon walked into the room, his heavy boots clanging on the deck. He ignored Piper completely. His pale blue eyes locked onto Adrian. "So," Malachi said. His voice was a grinding tectonic rumble. "This is the pet." "I am not a pet," Adrian spat. Malachi stepped closer, looming over him. He smelled of old blood and expensive incense. He reached out a massive hand and tilted Adrian's chin up, inspecting the bandage on his neck. Adrian tried to pull away, but the Archon's grip was immovable. "Sable has eclectic tastes," Malachi mused, releasing Adrian with a dismissive shove. "She claims you are necessary, a strategic asset for the negotiations." "I do not know what you are talking about," Adrian said. "The Sapphire perihelion is approaching," Malachi said, turning his back on Adrian as if he were discussing the weather. "The binary stars of the Gemini sector will align in 3 days. It is a holy time for our people, a time of judgment, a time to purge the weak." He turned back a cruel smile, revealing teeth that were too long, too sharp. "Sable has invoked the right of claim," Malachi continued. "She says you are hers. But at the perihelion, all claims are subject to assessment. If you are found to be unworthy, if you are found to be a weakness," he let the threat hang in the air. "What happens then?" Adrian asked, his fists clenching. "Then I will tear that throat out myself," Malachi said softly. "And I will finish what the Third Fleet started with your sister." Adrian lunged. It was pure instinct, a blinding flash of red rage. He didn't care about the size difference. He wanted to hurt this monster. But he didn't make it 2 steps. A wave of nausea hit him so hard he doubled over. His neck burned like a branding iron. He fell to his knees, gasping, clutching his chest. "The link," Piper whispered from the corner. "Sable must be agitated." Malachi looked down at the gasping human with a sneer. "Pathetic. She shackled herself to a corpse." He turned to the guards. "Keep him alive. I want him fresh for the ceremony." The Archon swept out of the room, the doors hissing shut behind him. Adrian remained on the floor, breathing hard, the pain in his neck slowly subsiding into a dull, rhythmic throb. He looked up at Piper, who was watching him, with a mixture of pity and scientific curiosity. "Welcome to the family," Piper said dryly. "Try not to bleed on the floor. It is harder to clean than you think." The corridors of the Voidstalker did not look like the interior of a ship. They looked like the throat of a living beast. Adrian Hart was running. He had no idea where he was going, only that he needed to be anywhere but here. The walls were lined with a dark organic polymer that seemed to breathe, pulsing, with a faint bioluminescent rhythm. There were no sharp angles, no clearly defined bulkheads, like on a coalition vessel. Everything curved. Everything flowed. He took a left turn at a junction that looked exactly like the last 3 he had passed. His boots slammed against the floor, the sound swallowed instantly by the dampening field that permeated the ship. He was looking for a sign, a docking bay symbol, an airlock override anything that spoke the universal language of escape. But the ship was fighting him. He had been running for what felt like 20 minutes, yet the layout seemed to shift. Corridors that should have led to the outer hull curved back inward. Elevators that should have gone down to the hangar decks refused to open their panels, flashing a soft, mocking amber. And then there was the pull. It started as a dull ache at the base of his neck, right where the bandage covered the puncture wounds. As he ran further, the ache sharpened. It evolved from a bruise into a burn, and then into a hook. It felt as though a fishing line had been threaded through his spinal column and was being reeled in by a giant hand. Adrian grit his teeth and pushed harder. He was a marathon runner in the academy. He had endurance. He could outrun pain. He turned another corner and stopped dead. He was back. He stood in front of the large obsidian doors he had sprinted away from 20 minutes ago. The pain in his neck vanished instantly, replaced by a soothing, terrifying warmth. The hook went slack. The doors hissed open. Inside the room was dimly lit, smelling of ozone and that strange, clean musk. It was Admiral Sable Ravel's private quarters. Sitting on a low, circular couch in the center of the room was Piper Wren. The small, copper-furred bioengineer was holding a datapad and looking bored. "Lap 1 complete," Piper said, not looking up. Time 22 minutes. Distance traveled 3 kilometers. Displacement from origin 0 meters. You are very consistent, Adrian. Adrian leaned against the doorframe chest, heaving sweat dripping down his forehead. The ship is reconfiguring. Smart ship, Piper agreed. The Voidstalker is linked to the Admiral's neural command codes. The Admiral is linked to you. Therefore, the ship knows that you belong within a specific radius of the Admiral. You try to leave that radius, and the ship guides you back, like a lost kitten. "I am not a kitten," Adrian snarled, pushing off the doorframe and storming into the room. "And I am not staying here." "Actually, you are," a cool voice said from the shadows. Sable stepped out from the adjoining chamber. She had shed her heavy ceremonial armor. Now, she wore a simple, form-fitting bodysuit of dark gray mesh that left her arms bare. The fur on her arms was sleek, rippling with muscle as she moved. She held a ceramic bowl in one hand. "Eat," Sable said, extending the bowl toward him. Adrian looked at the contents. It was a pinkish, gelatinous substance cut into precise cubes. "Synth tuna," Adrian said, his voice dripping with disgust. "You have got to be joking." "High-protein nutrient paste flavored with oceanic extracts," Sable corrected. "It is efficient. You need calories. Your metabolic rate has spiked by 40% since the bonding." Adrian slapped the bowl out of her hand. The ceramic shattered against the floor. The cubes of synth tuna scattered across the pristine black metal like dice. Silence slammed into the room. Piper slowly lowered her datapad. She pulled her legs up onto the couch, making herself smaller. Sable did not flinch. She looked at the mess on the floor, then slowly raised her golden eyes to Adrian's face. Her pupils had narrowed to razor-thin slits. The air in the room seemed to vibrate a low-frequency growl that Adrian felt in his teeth rather than heard. "Pick it up," Sable said. Her voice was quiet, deadly quiet. "No," Adrian challenged her. He was terrified, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs, but his anger was a hotter fire. "I am not your pet. I am not your prisoner. I am a human being, and you kidnapped me." Sable took a step forward. The connection between them flared a sudden spike of heat in Adrian's blood. It wasn't pain exactly. It was intensity. It was her anger bleeding into him. He gasped, staggering back as a wave of cold fury that wasn't his own washed over his mind. "I saved your life," Sable hissed, closing the distance. "Do you think Archon Malachi would have let you leave that station? You insulted him. You insulted the Imperium. He was going to have you spacing locked before you finished your drink." "So you bit me instead," Adrian shouted, fighting the foreign emotions flooding his brain. "You enslaved me to save me. That is twisted logic even for a Phalid." "It is the logic of survival," Sable roared. The shout was so loud it echoed off the walls. She loomed over him, her composure cracking for the first time. "Do you know what this mark is?" She pointed a clawed finger at his neck. "It is not just a collar, you idiot. It is a lifeline. My life for yours. Your pain is my pain. If you die, a part of my neural cortex burns out. If I die, your heart stops. I tied my existence to a fragile, emotional, breakable human. Do not talk to me about slavery. I just handed you the trigger to my own execution." Adrian stared at her stunned. The anger in her voice was genuine, but beneath it he could feel something else through the link. Fear. A deep, jagged fear that she had hidden behind her Admiral's uniform. Piper cleared her throat awkwardly from the couch. "Technically," Piper said, her voice small, "it is a bioquantum entanglement. The retrovirus in the Admiral's saliva rewrites your nervous system to resonate with hers. Distance causes dissonance. Dissonance causes pain. Extreme distance causes total organ failure. It is romantic in a horrific molecular sort of way." Adrian looked from Piper to Sable. The Admiral was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked less like a monster now, and more like someone who had made a desperate bet and was terrified of losing. "You call this peace," Adrian whispered, the fight draining out of him, leaving only exhaustion. Sable stared at him for a long moment. She smoothed the fur on her arms, regaining her icy demeanor. "No," she said softly. "I call it the price of living to see tomorrow." She knelt down. With dignified, precise movements, she began to pick up the pieces of the broken bowl. "Piper," Sable said without looking up, "get him another ration, and get him a chair. He looks like he is going to fall over." An hour later, the door chimed. Adrian was sitting on the edge of the couch, holding a fresh bowl of synth tuna that he hadn't touched. He was staring at the wall, trying to make sense of the new sensations in his body. He could feel Sable's presence in the next room, like a hum in the back of his skull. He knew she was reading reports. He could feel a vague sense of concentration and frustration radiating from her. "Enter," Sable called out from her desk. The doors opened, and two massive Felid guards dragged a struggling figure into the room. "Get your paws off the merchandise. The jacket is vintage leather, you oversized scratching posts." Adrian's head snapped up. Jax. Jax Morrow was thrown unceremoniously onto the floor. He scrambled up, adjusting his collar. He looked disheveled. His mechanic's jumpsuit was torn at the shoulder, and he had a ripening bruise over his left eye. "Adrian!" Jax's eyes widened as he took in the scene. The luxury suite, the brooding Admiral and his friend, sitting on the couch with a bowl of pink cubes. "Oh, thank the stars! I thought they had eaten you." "What are you doing here?" Adrian stood up, rushing over to check his friend. "Well," Jax winced as he poked his bruise. "After you got abducted, I may have thrown a bar stool at a patrol officer. And then I may have tried to hack the docking clamps of their shuttle to stop them from taking you. Turns out, Felid encryption is better than I thought." Sable turned her chair around. She watched the reunion with an unreadable expression. "He is a saboteur," Sable said flatly. "Standard protocol is execution." Jax paled. "I prefer the term aggressive negotiator." "I had him brought here instead," Sable continued, ignoring Jax. "I thought you might need familiar company. He can stay in the brig or he can stay in the guest quarters, provided he does not touch anything." Jax looked at Adrian, then at the bandage on Adrian's neck. His eyes went wide. "Oh no," Jax whispered. "Adrian, that mark." "Is that—" "Yes," Adrian said grimly. Jax covered his mouth, looking between Adrian and Sable. "I told you to kiss her, Adrian. I said kiss. A peck. A smooch. I did not mean for you to get adopted." "It is not adoption," Piper chimed in from the corner, where she was tinkering with a drone. "It is a biobond. Essentially, they are married, but with more screaming and less cake." "Married," Jax choked. He looked at Sable, 6.5 feet of lethal predatory elegance, and then at Adrian. "Buddy, you really committed to the bit, didn't you?" "Shut up, Jax," Adrian said, but there was no heat in it. Having Jax here hearing his stupid jokes was the first thing that had felt real in 12 hours. Sable stood up. "Enough. Piper, take the mechanic to the guest quarters. Lock him in. Give him food. If he tries to hack anything, break his fingers." "Understood," Piper chirped. She hopped off the couch and gestured to Jax. "Come on, Grease Monkey. I have questions about Coalition warp drive stabilizers." Jax looked at Adrian. "You okay?" "I am still breathing," Adrian said. "Go. I will figure this out." Once they were gone, the room felt heavy again. Sable walked over to the viewport. The stars were streaking by as the ship traveled at warp speed. "You have a choice, Adrian Hart," she said. Adrian laughed bitterly. "I think we established that I do not." "You do," she turned to him. "The perihelion is in 3 days. We are traveling to the Sapphire sector. When we arrive, the Archon will demand an assessment. He wants to prove that our bond is weak, that it is a sham. If he succeeds, he will kill you to shame me, and then he will use that shame to strip me of my rank and launch his war." She walked closer, her voice intense. "Option 1. You fight the bond. You resist. You stay angry. And when the assessment comes, the resonance will fail. You will die in agony, and the galaxy will burn." "And option 2. You learn," she said. "You stay here. You learn to control the link. You learn to tolerate me. We present a united front. We pass the assessment. You live. And perhaps we stop a war." Adrian looked at her. He hated her. He hated the way she manipulated the situation, the way she spoke of galactic stakes while holding him prisoner. But he was also a scientist. He was an observer. And he saw the desperation in her posture. He walked over to the desk where she had been working. A holographic map was still shimmering in the air. It showed the trajectory of the Voidstalker. The destination wasn't just a star system. It was a specific coordinate. Sector 7G, the Lattice Shrine. Adrian froze. "The Lattice Shrine," he whispered. Sable nodded. "Yes, the ancient station where the treaty is renewed. It opens only during the perihelion." Adrian's mind raced back to the last message he had received from his sister Mara 2 years ago. It had been a fragmented audio log filled with static. "Found something, Adrian. Not just a patrol route. They are hiding something at the lattice. The shrine, it sings." "I think it is waking up." Mara had been there. She had been at the shrine before she vanished. And now, the Archon was terrified of this bond. Why was it just politics? Or was it something about the shrine itself, the Diguan relic, Adrian said, using the human term for the pre-Empire artifacts. "My sister mentioned it. She said it was waking up." Sable's eyes widened slightly. "Your sister was a pilot. Pilots do not study Zen archaeology." "She was curious," Adrian said, and then she was gone. He looked at Sable. Really looked at her. If he ran, he died. If he fought, he died. But if he stayed, if he went to the shrine, he might find the answer to the question that had haunted him for 5 years. "I will do it," Adrian said. Sable let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. "Good. But not for you," Adrian added sharply. "I am doing it because I want to see the Archon fall. And I want to know what happened to Mara." "Motives do not matter to the bond," Sable said. "Only intent. If you intend to survive, we can work." "So, what do I do?" "You sit," Sable said, gesturing to the floor, "and you open your mind." The training was torture. Not the physical kind, but something more invasive. They sat on the floor, facing each other, knees almost touching. Sable instructed him to close his eyes and focus on the pain in his neck. "Do not fight it," she guided him, her voice a low rumble. "Pain is just information. It is a signal. Your brain interprets the alien signal as damage because it does not have a vocabulary for it yet. You must teach it a new language." "It feels like burning," Adrian gritted out, sweat stinging his eyes. "That is because you are trying to block it. You are building a dam. The river will always break the dam. You must be a channel. Let it flow through." Adrian tried. He visualized the burning sensation, not as fire, but as water. He tried to direct it down his spine into his limbs. It was impossibly hard. His human instinct was to recoil, to tense up, to reject the intrusion. "Look at me," Sable commanded. Adrian opened his eyes. Gold met brown. "I am not your enemy right now," she said. "I am your anchor. Feel me." And he did. He felt her fatigue. It was a heavy gray weight on her shoulders. He felt her anxiety, a sharp buzzing static. But beneath it all, he felt a core of steel discipline, a rigid, unyielding determination to protect her crew, her people. It was admirable. Adrian took a breath. He stopped fighting the connection. He reached out with his mind tentatively and touched that core of steel. Immediately the pain in his neck receded. It didn't disappear, but it changed. It became a hum, a background vibration like the ship's engine. He felt a sudden clarity, a sharpening of his senses. He could hear the blood rushing in his own ears. He could hear the heartbeat of the woman sitting across from him. Thump, 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 thump. It was slower than a human heart, stronger. "You are doing it," Sable whispered. She looked surprised. "Most take weeks to reach this stage." "Humans are adaptable," Adrian said, his voice raspy. "We do not break. We just change shape." Sable held his gaze. For a moment, the room fell away. There was just the two of them connected by an invisible thread of quantum biology and mutual desperation. "Yes," she murmured. "I am beginning to see that." That night, the dreams came. They were not his dreams. Adrian found himself standing on a plain of red grass. The sky above was a swirling tempest of purple clouds. Two moons hung heavy and low on the horizon. He looked down at his hands. They were his hands, but they were dressed in rough, woven fabric, not a Starfleet uniform. In front of him stood a Felid. But this one was not wearing a uniform. He was naked, save for a loincloth and ceremonial paint, made of white clay. He was huge, scarred, and ancient. The Felid extended a hand. It was not a threat. It was an offer. Adrian, or the ancestor whose eyes he was borrowing, reached out. Hand met paw. Skin met fur. There was no biting, no chains, no pain. There was only a promise, a silent vow between two species to stand together against the dark. The feeling of the grip was warm, solid, and filled with a profound brotherly respect. "We are not masters and slaves," a voice whispered in the wind. "We are the shield and the sword." Adrian woke up with a gasp. The room was dark. He was lying on the couch in Sable's quarters. He sat up, his heart racing. The memory of the dream was vivid, more real than the metal walls around him. He looked across the room. Sable was asleep on her bed. She was curled up on her side, looking much smaller than she did when she was awake. Her breathing was deep and even. Adrian rubbed the mark on his neck. It didn't hurt. It hummed. "Echo dreams," a voice said from the shadows. Adrian jumped. Piper was sitting in a chair in the corner, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "What?" Adrian whispered. "You saw something, didn't you?" Piper asked quietly. "Old memories, genetic resonance. The fang mark accesses the ancestral memory stored in our junk DNA." "I saw a peace treaty," Adrian said. "But not the one we signed. This was older," Piper nodded. "Thousands of years older. Before the Empire, before the Coalition, before we forgot who we were." She stood up and walked over to him. Her usual snark was gone, replaced by a somber seriousness. "Sable hates this, you know," Piper said, gesturing to the sleeping Admiral. "She hates that she had to bite you. She is a reformist. She believes the old ways, the claiming the dominance, are barbaric. But she is trapped." "Trapped by what?" "Politics," Piper said. "Tradition. Archon Malachi holds the council by the throat. He claims he is restoring our glory, but he is just turning us into monsters. Sable thought if she used the old law to save a human, she could prove that we can coexist. That the bond does not have to be slavery." "She has a funny way of showing it," Adrian muttered. She is a soldier, Piper shrugged. She is bad at feelings. But she is not the villain Adrian. She is just another piece on the board trying not to get knocked over. Piper tapped her datapad. A holographic projection flickered to life, a news feed. I intercepted this an hour ago, she said. The image showed a fleet of Felid warships gathering near a massive crystalline structure floating in space. The Lattice Shrine. Malachi is moving the 7th Fleet, Piper explained. He is not waiting for the assessment. He is positioning for a first strike. He plans to use the perihelion ceremony as a provocation. He will claim the human spy you corrupted the Admiral. He will execute you both on live transmission and use the outrage to launch a full-scale invasion of the Coalition sectors. Adrian stared at the red dots on the map. Thousands of ships, millions of lives. And somewhere in that crystalline structure was the truth about Mara. He looked back at Sable. She stirred in her sleep, a low sound of distress escaping her throat. Through the link, Adrian felt a spike of nightmare fear. She was dreaming of burning cities. He made a decision. He wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to just survive. Piper, Adrian said, his voice steady. Can you get me access to the ship's historical archives? Specifically anything regarding the Lattice Shrine and bioresonance. Piper grinned, her ears twitching. I already downloaded it to your datapad. I knew you were the curious type. Adrian stood up and walked to the viewport. The stars blurred into streaks of light, leading them inexorably toward the Sapphire sector. Let the Archon come, Adrian whispered to the void. I am going to break his game. He looked at his reflection in the glass. The bandage on his neck was stark white against his skin. He touched it, not with fear, but with a newfound sense of purpose. He would play the pet. He would play the victim. And when Malachi Rook least expected it, Adrian Hart was going to show the galaxy exactly what a human could do when backed into a corner. Even if he had to drag a stubborn, 400-pound cat Admiral along with him. Perihelion Station was not so much a fortress as it was a cathedral of arrogance built from spun glass and reinforced ambition. It hung in the vacuum at the precise gravitational midpoint between the binary stars, a glittering needle of transparency that allowed the blinding sapphire light to flood every corridor, every chamber, and every secret meeting room. There were no shadows here. There was nowhere to hide. To Adrian Hart, looking out from the docking viewport of the Voidstalker, it looked like a terrifying place to die. The Felid flagship shuddered as the docking clamps engaged. The metallic groan reverberated through the hull, a sound that Adrian felt deep in his bones. Or perhaps that was just the sympathetic echo from Sable, standing beside him. Through the biolink he could feel her tension. It was a cold, tight knot in the center of her chest, distinct from his own hot, churning anxiety. You are projecting, Sable murmured. She was dressed in her full ceremonial whites today, a stark contrast to her usual dark attire. The high collar hid the scars of old battles, but it could not hide the stiffness in her posture. Your fear tastes like copper wire. It is distracting. Sorry, Adrian adjusted the high collar of the diplomatic suit Piper had fabricated for him. It was uncomfortable tight around the throat, hiding the bandage that covered the fang mark. I am not used to walking into a room where half the people want to arrest me and the other half want to eat me. Do not exaggerate, Sable said, checking the charge on her sidearm. Only the Archon wants to eat you. The rest just want to watch. The airlock hissed open. The reception bay of Perihelion Station was a blinding expanse of crystalline walls. The floor was transparent, revealing the dizzying drop into the starry void below. Walking on it required a supreme act of faith that the structural integrity was greater than it looked. Waiting for them was a small delegation. At the center stood a human woman in a lab coat that looked slept in. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression suggested she had run out of patience approximately 5 years ago. Dr. Celine Park. The astrophysicist of the Peace Committee. Flanking her were 2 armed guards, One human one, Khalid, standing at uncomfortable attention. And behind them, Adrian's breath hitched. Commander Owen Hart stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked older than the last holocall. The gray at his temples had spread, and the lines around his eyes had deepened into permanent trenches of grief. He wore the dress uniform of the Coalition Navy, but he wore it like armor, heavy and burdensome. "Ambassadors," Dr. Park's voice cut through the silence. It was sharp, amplified by the acoustics of the glass chamber. "Welcome to the glass chapel. Please try not to break anything. We are currently tracking a solar flare from the secondary star, and I do not have time to clean up diplomatic incidents." Sable stepped forward, her boots clicking rhythmically on the glass floor. "Dr. Park, we appreciate the reception. The Imperium acknowledges the neutrality of this station." "I do not care what the Imperium acknowledges," Dr. Park replied, looking over the rim of her datapad. "I do not stand with the Imperium, and I do not stand with the Coalition. I stand for the mathematical probability of survival. My job is to ensure that millions of people do not die because a few leaders have bruised egos. Keep your weapons sheathed and your voices down." She stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter the main atrium. As the group moved, Owen Hart broke formation. He walked straight toward Adrian. The guards tensed, but Sable raised a hand, signaling them to stand down. "Dad," Adrian whispered. Owen stopped a foot away. He looked at his son, really looked at him, scanning for injuries, for signs of torture. His eyes landed on the high collar of Adrian's suit, lingering on the spot where the bandage lay hidden. "Adrian," Owen's voice was rough, like gravel tumbling in a mixer. He reached out and pulled Adrian into a hug. It was not a gentle embrace. It was a desperate grip, the kind a man gives when he is checking if the person he is holding is real. Adrian hugged him back, squeezing his eyes shut. For a second, the biolink with Sable faded into the background noise, drowned out by the sheer human ache of missing his father. Owen pulled back, keeping his hands on Adrian's shoulders. The warmth in his eyes hardened into the steel of an investigator. "Are you hurt?" Owen asked. "I am fine," Adrian said. "I am whole." "That is not what I asked." Owen's gaze shifted to Sable, who was standing a respectful distance away, watching them with an unreadable expression. "Did she force you, Adrian?" "The report said you were taken. It said you were claimed." The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Sable stepped forward before Adrian could answer. "Commander Hart," she said. Her voice was not the command voice of an admiral, but something softer, more measured. "I understand your anger." "You understand nothing," Owen snapped, stepping between Sable and his son. His hand drifted instinctively toward his empty holster. Weapons were forbidden in the chapel. "You took my son. You branded him like livestock." "I saved his life," Sable said, meeting Owen's glare without flinching. "Archon Malachi intended to execute him at Driftport 9. The Fangmark was the only legal loophole that granted him immediate diplomatic immunity under our ancient laws." "By enslaving him." "By binding him," Sable corrected. "There is a difference." "Is there?" Owen challenged. "Can he leave? Can he walk away right now and get on a shuttle back to Earth?" Sable went silent. The truth was a physical weight in the room. "No," she said quietly. "He cannot. If he leaves my proximity for more than a few hours, the neural dissonance will stop his heart." Owen's face went pale, then red with fury. He looked ready to strike her rank and treaty be damned. "Dad, stop!" Adrian intervened, stepping in front of his father. "She is telling the truth. It was a choice between this or an airlock. I am still here. I am still me." Owen looked at his son, searching his face for signs of brainwashing. Are you just saying what the collar makes you say?" "I am saying it because I am still the same stubborn idiot who refused to evacuate the academy during the riots," Adrian said, managing a weak smile. I am navigating the situation, just like you taught me. Owen let out a long, shuddering breath. He looked at Sable again, his eyes cold. If he comes to harm Admiral, if he suffers because of your politics, I will personally deconstruct your ship bolt by bolt. If he comes to harm Commander, Sable said, her voice dropping to a solemn vow, I will likely be dead before you get the chance. Dr. Park cleared her throat, the sound echoing loudly off the glass walls. As touching as this testosterone-fueled display of affection is, we have a schedule. The Archon is waiting in the resonance chamber, and he does not like to be kept waiting. The resonance chamber was a masterpiece of intimidation. It was a circular hall with walls made of polarized crystal that could shift from opaque to transparent. Currently, they were set to a smoky translucence, allowing the sapphire light of the stars to filter in like underwater currents. In the center of the room sat a curved table. On one side sat the coalition delegates looking uncomfortable in their stiff uniforms. On the other side sat the Phalid High Council, a row of apex predators in silk and armor. And at the head of the table on a raised dais sat Archon Malachi Rook. He did not stand when they entered. He merely watched them with eyes that looked like chips of glacial ice. He was peeling a piece of exotic fruit with a small curved knife, his movements languid and terrifyingly precise. Admiral Ravel, Malachi purred. And her acquisition, you are late. We were delayed by security protocols, Sable said, taking her seat at the far end of the table. Adrian stood behind her chair, hands clasped behind his back, as was the protocol for a bound companion. Jax, who had been cleaned up and shoved into a mechanic's formal jumpsuit, stood near the door with Piper. He gave Adrian a tiny, nervous thumbs up. Let us dispense with the pleasantries, Malachi said, tossing the fruit peel onto the table. We are here to verify the legitimacy of the bond. The Admiral claims she invoked the right of the Fang to save a valuable asset. I claim she invoked it to hide a coalition spy and shield him from justice. He gestured to a servant, who brought forward a tray. On it sat a single goblet, made of dark iron, filled with a thick, crimson liquid. The blood serum, Malachi announced. A solution of refined psionic reactive compounds. In the old days, it was used to test the loyalty of generals. It lowers the cognitive barriers. It makes it difficult to lie without causing oneself excruciating neural feedback. Dr. Park stood up abruptly. Objection. That substance is a neurotoxin. It does not extract truth. It induces a state of extreme suggestibility and emotional rawness. It is not science. It is torture. It is tradition, Malachi countered, his voice hard. And this is a Phalid matter, Doctor. Unless the Coalition wishes to admit that the human is a spy, he is subject to our laws. Sable's hand tightened on the armrest of her chair. Adrian could feel her panic spiking. She started to stand. Archon, this is unnecessary. The bond itself is proof. Drink it, Malachi commanded, looking directly at Adrian. Or I will have your friend the mechanic thrown out of the airlock for violating customs regulations, Jax squeaked from the corner. Adrian placed a hand on Sable's shoulder, a breach of protocol that made the council members gasp. He felt her trembling. Trust me, he projected the thought as hard as he could through the link. I will drink it, Adrian said aloud. He stepped forward, took the iron goblet, and before he could hesitate, he downed the contents in one swallow. It tasted like copper and fire. The effect was instantaneous. It wasn't like being drunk. It was like having the skin peeled off his mind. Every sensory input was amplified 100 times. The hum of the lights sounded like a scream. The texture of his clothes felt like sandpaper. And his emotions, fear, anger, sorrow boiled up from his subconscious, raw and unfiltered. He gasped, gripping the edge of the table to stay upright. Now, Malachi leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. Tell us, human, do you hate Admiral Sable Ravel? The trap was elegant. If Adrian said yes, the bond was a sham, a prison, and Malachi would execute him to liberate the Admiral from a hostile link. If he said no, he was admitting to being a traitor to his own species, a sympathizer which would discredit Sable politically. The truth was bubbling up his throat. Yes, she kidnapped me, she bit me, she represents the enemy. But Adrian remembered the training. Redirect the flow. He closed his eyes. He didn't fight the serum. He took the burning sensation of the truth and twisted it, pushed it through the lens of his intellect. "I hate," Adrian gasped the words, fighting to escape. "I hate the war," Malachi frowned. "That is not what I asked." "I hate the silence of my house," Adrian forced the words out, sweat dripping down his nose. "I hate that my father cries when he thinks I am not listening. I hate that we are all just meat for the grinder." He opened his eyes and looked straight at Sable. "But I do not hate the person who gave me a chance to stop it." It was the truth. It was a carefully curated slice of the truth, but the serum accepted it. The neural feedback didn't kill him. It just throbbed a warning bell rather than an executioner's axe. Malachi narrowed his eyes. "You evade. Let us try again. Are you here to destroy the Imperium?" "I am here," Adrian gritted his teeth, his knees shaking. "I am here to find what was lost. I am here because the Lattice Shrine is calling." The room went deadly silent. Malachi's mask of composure cracked. For a split second, genuine fear flitted across his face. "He is delirious," Malachi snapped. "The serum is too strong for his primitive physiology." "He is telling the truth," Jax yelled from the back of the room. The silence shattered. Everyone turned to look at the mechanic. Jax realized he was the center of attention and swallowed hard. "I mean, look at him. He is not a spy. He is a xenopsychology dropout who reads poetry. He was not forced into this. He just, well, he got autographed by a cat. It happens. We have all had bad dates." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the coalition delegates. Even Dr. Park cracked a smile. The tension so carefully constructed by Malachi deflated like a punctured lung. Sable seized the moment. She stood up, radiating authority. "The assessment is concluded," she declared. "The bound companion has spoken under the influence of the serum. He harbors no malice toward the bond, unless the Archon wishes to question the potency of the sacred mixture." Malachi glared at her. He had been outmaneuvered not by force, but by a human's ability to bend without breaking. "The ceremony proceeds," Malachi hissed. "But know this, Ravel. The perihelion light reveals all flaws. We shall see if your pet survives the resonance of the shrine." An hour later, they were in a secure holding room. The walls here were opaque, thankfully. Adrian was sitting on a bench, shivering. The serum was wearing off, leaving him cold and nauseous. Sable was pacing the length of the room, her tail lashing back and forth. "You are an idiot," she said, but there was no venom in it. "A brave, reckless idiot. You could have fried your synapses." "I told you," Adrian mumbled, accepting a bottle of water from Piper. "I am good at tests." Piper was scanning a datapad, her ears twitching frantically. "Hey, while everyone was distracted by Adrian's dramatic monologue, I ran a background scan on the local frequencies, using the authorization codes we stole from Malachi's shuttle." She turned the pad toward them. "Look at this." It was a waveform, a jagged, irregular signal repeating on a loop. "It is coming from the Lattice Shrine," Piper said. "It is a distress beacon, old encryption, Coalition Navy standard." Adrian squinted at the screen. The pattern looked familiar. It wasn't just a standard SOS. It was a rhythm. Long, short, long, long. "That is not a standard code," Adrian whispered. He felt the blood drain from his face. "That is a drumbeat." "A drumbeat?" Sable asked. "My father used to play jazz," Adrian said, his voice trembling. "When we were kids, he taught Mara and me to tap out rhythms as a secret code. That rhythm that is the opening fill to Blue and Green, Mara's favorite song." He looked up at Sable, his eyes wide with a terrifying hope. She is there, my sister. She is inside the lattice shrine. Sable looked at the waveform, then at Adrian. The implications were catastrophic. If a human pilot was inside the most sacred Felid relic, and if Malachi knew about it, that is why he wants war, Sable realized. He is not just hiding a relic. He is hiding a hostage. Or worse, he is using her. The door chimed and Owen Hart stepped in. He had evidently bypassed the guards. He looked at the group, the exhausted human, the pacing admiral, the frantic bioengineer. The Archon has moved the timeline, Owen said grimly. The perihelion ritual starts in 2 hours. He is going to open the shrine remotely from the glass chapel. He looked at Adrian. If you are right about that signal, whatever is in there is going to be exposed to the full resonance of the binary stars. If Mara is in there, she will be wiped, Piper finished. Like a hard drive in a microwave. The room fell silent. Sable walked over to the window, looking out at the distant crystalline shape of the lattice shrine floating against the burning stars. Adrian stood up. His legs were still shaky, but his mind was clear. He walked over to stand beside her. He reached out and, without thinking, brushed his fingers against the bandage on his neck. Sable flinched, not away, but into the touch. She turned to look at him. The golden eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. "It hurts," she whispered. "The mark. The choice," she said. "In our law, the fang mark has 2 forms. If the bond is rejected, it becomes a chain, a source of agony until one party dies. But if the bond is accepted, if the choice is mutual—" "What does it become?" Adrian asked. Sable looked at his hand on her neck. "It becomes a lens, a way to focus strength, to share the load." She looked up at him, her expression vulnerable, in a way no admiral should ever be. "I did not want to chain you, Adrian. I just did not know how to ask for help." Adrian looked at her. He saw the monster the galaxy feared, and he saw the woman beneath it. He realized that his hand was not shaking from the serum anymore. It was shaking, because for the first time in 5 years, he didn't feel alone in his grief. "We are going to get her back," Adrian said softly. "And we are going to take Malachi down." "How?" Sable asked. "He controls the station. He controls the fleet." "He controls the pieces," Adrian said, a dangerous light entering his eyes. "But he forgot one thing. He is playing chess. We are playing jazz." Owen Hart cleared his throat. He looked at the 2 of them, the human and the Felid, standing close, their silhouettes merging against the starlight. "Adrian," Owen said. "A word of advice from a man who has made many mistakes." Adrian turned. "Yes, Dad." "Do not marry another alien," Owen deadpanned. "Your mother barely tolerated the fact that I liked synth jazz. I do not think she would handle a daughter-in-law who eats raw tuna." Adrian laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound, but it was real. "I am still learning how to survive, Dad. Marriage is not on the agenda." "Yet," Jax whispered to Piper. Piper elbowed him in the ribs. Suddenly, the intercom of the station blared to life. Malachi's voice boomed through the glass walls, distorted and godlike. "Citizens of the Imperium, delegates of the Coalition, the time of the sapphire perihelion is upon us. Gather in the glass chapel. Tonight, the shrine opens. Tonight, we shall see the true face of the universe." The lights in the station dimmed, replaced by the ominous rising glow of the binary stars outside. "And tonight," Malachi's voice dropped to a sinister purr, "we will demonstrate that humanity is nothing but fuel for the fire of the future." Sable drew her sidearm and checked the power cell one last time. She looked at Adrian. "Ready." Adrian touched the mark on his neck. It felt warm. It felt like a promise. "Ready," he said. They walked out of the safe room, side by side, into the blinding light of the chapel. The chapel of glass ceased to be a room and became a cage of light. As the binary stars of the Gemini sector reached their zenith, the sapphire perihelion began. It was not a gentle sunrise. It was a violent, silent scream of radiation and luminance. The transparent walls of the station seemed to vibrate, humming with a frequency that set teeth on edge and made the bone marrow itch. The light did not just illuminate, it penetrated. It turned the skin of every delegate translucent, revealing the pulsing veins and terrified heartbeats beneath. Archon, Malachi Rook, stood at the altar, his silhouette carved out of shadow against the blinding blue inferno outside. He raised his arms, and the floor of the chapel shifted. "Behold," Malachi's voice boomed, amplified by the station's acoustics, until it sounded like the grinding of tectonic plates. "The resonance throne." From the center of the crystalline floor, a structure rose. It was ugly. In a place built of elegant glass and light, the throne was a slab of dark, pre-Empire machinery. It looked like a dentist's chair designed by a torturer, covered in coils of copper and weeping hydraulic fluids. It was a relic of the old war, repurposed for a new atrocity. "Seize him," Malachi commanded. The royal guards moved before Sable could draw her weapon. They were fast enhanced by combat stims. Two of them slammed the butt of their rifles into Sable's knees, forcing her down, while three others grabbed Adrian. "No!" Sable roared, the sound tearing from her throat. She fought with the ferocity of a cornered panther, but there were too many of them. They pinned her to the glass floor, pressing a shock baton to the base of her spine. Adrian didn't fight. He knew the physics of the situation. He let them drag him to the throne. He let them strap his wrists and ankles into the cold metal clamps. "You do not understand the Fangmark human," Malachi said, walking over to loom above Adrian. "You think it is a wedding ring. It is not. It is a biological key. It contains the genetic resonance of the biter, the Admiral, and the neural map of the bitten. When combined, they form a frequency." Malachi leaned in, his breath smelling of stale ozone. "And that frequency is the only thing that can unlock the core of the lattice shrine. I do not need your permission to use it. I just need your nervous system to be conductive." He slammed his hand down on a control panel. The throne woke up. It didn't start with pain. It started with sound. A high-pitched whine that drilled directly into Adrian's auditory cortex. Then, the clamps around his wrists heated up. "Ah!" Adrian screamed, as the first wave of extraction hit him. It wasn't like being burned. It was like being unraveled. He felt a hook sink into the base of his neck, right into the fang mark, and pull. It wasn't pulling flesh. It was pulling him. Memories flashed before his eyes, blinding and rapid. His 7th birthday. The smell of his mother's cooking. The day he got his acceptance letter to the academy. The look on Jax's face when he dropped a wrench on his foot. Zip. Gone. The machine was stripping the data from his mind to isolate the signal of the bond. "Stop it," Owen Hart's voice cracked from the sidelines. He drew a concealed pistol, a violation of every treaty in the sector. But before he could fire, Dr. Celine Park slammed her shoulder into him, knocking his aim off. "Do not shoot the machine," Celine hissed, grappling with the larger man. "It is creating a biofeedback loop. If you break the circuit suddenly, you will liquefy Adrian's brain." On the throne, Adrian was convulsing. The pain was absolute. It was a white room where nothing existed but the sensation of being erased. He felt the bond with Sable being stretched taut, like a violin string about to snap. Through the agony he felt her. She wasn't screaming. She was singing, no, not singing. She was projecting. Hold on, I am here." It was a lifeline thrown into a hurricane. But the hurricane was stronger. Adrian felt his consciousness fading, dissolving into the sapphire light. He was forgetting his name. He was forgetting why he was here. And then, in the static of his disintegrating mind, he heard it. Thump, 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 hiss. It wasn't his heart. It wasn't Sable. It was a whisper. A voice made of dust and starlight. Keep the tempo, little brother, don't let them play you flat, Mara. The realization hit Adrian like a bucket of ice water. She was here. She was in the light. She was part of the system the Archon was trying to rape. She is the song, Adrian thought, clutching at the fragment of clarity. The shrine isn't a weapon. It's an instrument. Malachi ramped up the power. Increase the voltage to 80%, extract the code. You will kill him, Sable screamed. She bucked against the guards, her strength amplified by sheer adrenaline. Then he dies serving the Imperium, Malachi spat. Sable's eyes went completely black. Her pupils expanded until the gold was gone. She opened her mouth and a sound came out that had not been heard in a diplomatic chamber for 3,000 years. It was the Karul, the death keening. It was a vocalization that hit a resonant frequency, capable of shattering glass. The windows of the chapel vibrated. The guards holding her covered their ears, howling in pain as their eardrums threatened to burst. Blood began to trickle from Sable's nose and ears. She was pushing her vocal cords beyond their biological limit, using her own body as a sonic weapon to disrupt the machine's sensitive calibration. She is jamming the signal, a technician yelled, frantically tapping at a console. The interference is creating a feedback spike. Malachi drew his sword. Silence her. Hey, ugly, a voice chirped from the scaffolding above. Everyone looked up. Piper Wren was hanging by her knees from a maintenance strut 20 feet in the air. Catch! She threw something. It wasn't a grenade. It was a small, pulsing bioorganic sphere glowing green. It arced through the air. Adrian, despite the straps, despite the agony that was turning his blood to acid, saw it coming. His seeker reflexes, honed by years of playing zero-gravity handball, kicked in. He couldn't move his hands, but he could move his head. He snapped his neck forward, catching the device in his mouth. He bit down. The bio-key shattered between his teeth, releasing a rush of bitter, chemically engineered fluid. It tasted like mint and battery acid. "Don't die!" Piper yelled as she scrambled away from guard fire. "I hate writing fatality reports. The paperwork is a nightmare." The fluid hit Adrian's system. It was a neurostimulant mixed with a synaptic dampener. It didn't stop the pain, but it cleared the fog. It rebuilt the walls of his mind for a few precious seconds. The machine was still pulling. The Archon was still winning. The force was overwhelming. You can't outpull a machine, Adrian thought, his mind racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's stronger than you. It's bigger than you. He looked at Malachi. The Archon was grinning, a portrait of triumph. He expects resistance, Adrian realized. He expects me to pull back. To be a wall. Be water, Sable had said. Redirect the flow. Be jazz, his father had taught him. Change the time signature. Adrian stopped fighting the extraction. Instead, he leaned into it. He closed his eyes and focused on his own heartbeat. Thump, thump. He forced his breathing to slow down. He forced his heart to skip a beat, then race, then slow again. He introduced a chaotic, syncopated rhythm into the biofeedback loop. He took the raw energy the machine was pumping into him, and instead of blocking it, he modulated it. He pushed it back out through the fang mark, but he changed the frequency. He broadcasted the rhythm of blue in green. The resonance throne shuddered. The humming whine turned into a grinding screech. The lights on the console turned from amber to a violent violet. "What is he doing?" Malachi shouted. "The waveforms are desynchronizing." "He is conducting it!" the technician screamed. The throne began to change. The dark metal plates shifted, rotating like the tumblers of a safe. The pain in Adrian's body vanished, replaced by a sensation of pure, blinding power. He wasn't the victim anymore. He was the lens. "Show them," Adrian whispered through his bloody teeth. "Show them who you are." A beam of pure white light shot up from the throne, hitting the apex of the glass ceiling. It didn't break the glass. It refracted, splitting into 1,000 beams that swept across the room like a lighthouse scan. This was the essence mirror, the true function of the ancient device. The light hit the crowd. Where it touched the coalition delegates, it showed a soft blue aura, fear, duty, exhaustion. Where it touched Owen Hart, it glowed with a fierce protective gold. Where it touched Sable, who was staggering to her feet, it shone with a complex, beautiful tapestry of silver and iron duty, and love inextricably bound. Then, the light hit Malachi Rook. The scream that tore from the Archon's throat was not human, nor was it Phalid. It was the sound of an ego being flayed alive. The hologram projected above him was not noble. It was a swirling, oily vortex of black and rot red. It smelled of sulfur. It showed scenes of betrayal, Malachi poisoning his predecessor Malachi, ordering the destruction of the relief ships, Malachi laughing as he planned the war. It was undeniable. It was broadcast on every screen, reflected in every pane of glass. "He is corrupted," a council member gasped, backing away. "The mirror reveals the soul. He is hollow." "Lies!" Malachi roared, swinging his sword wildly at the light beams. "It is a trick. The human has corrupted the machine." But his own guards were lowering their weapons. They looked at their leader, then at the monstrous projection of his psyche, and the instinctual loyalty of the Phalid cracked. "You followed the strong, yes, but you did not follow the rot." "It is over, Malachi," Sable said. She stood tall, blood dripping from her nose, onto her white uniform, looking like a vengeance spirit. "The shrine rejects you. The fleet sees you." Malachi looked around. He saw the disgust in the eyes of his council. He saw the cold resolve in the eyes of the humans. His face twisted into a mask of pure spite. "If I cannot lead the future," Malachi snarled, reaching into his tunic and pulling out a jagged remote detonator, "then there will be no future to lead." He pressed the button. Explosions rocked the station, not inside the chapel, but deep below in the gravitational stabilizers. The floor tilted violently to the left. Glass shattered. The scream of tearing metal drowned out the hum of the throne. "Gravity failure," Dr. Park yelled, checking her datapad as she slid across the floor. "The station is deorbiting. We are falling into the star." Panic erupted. The orderly rows of delegates dissolved into a stampede. Humans and Phalids alike clawed over each other to get to the airlocks. Malachi used the chaos. He threw a smoke grenade, standard military issue, and vanished into the swirling gray cloud toward his private escape pod. "He is getting away," Jax yelled, pointing at the smoke. Adrian was released from the throne as the power failed. He slumped forward, his muscles jelly, but Sable was there, instantly catching him before he hit the floor. "We have to go," Sable said, hoisting his arm over her shoulder. "The docking clamps are disengaging. If we do not get to the Voidstalker in 5 minutes, we burn." They began to run, or rather limp rapidly toward the exit. But as they reached the shattered atrium, a cry for help cut through the sirens. A large section of the glass ceiling had collapsed, pinning a group of 4 technicians, 3 Phalid, 1 human, under a massive support beam. They were trapped in a pocket of air, but the hull breach was widening. The radiation from the star was starting to bleed in, turning the air shimmering and deadly. "Help!" the human tech screamed. "Please!" Malachi was escaping to the left, down the secure executive corridor. The technicians were to the right in the crumbling maintenance bay. Sable looked at Malachi's path. Her ears flattened. Every instinct in her body screamed, "Predator. Chase the enemy. Kill the threat. End the war." Then she looked at Adrian. He had stopped. He wasn't looking at the Archon. He was looking at the technicians. He was exhausted. He had just been tortured, and he could barely stand. But he let go of Sable's shoulder. "Go get him," Adrian wheezed. "I will get them." "You cannot lift that beam," Sable said, her voice tight. "You will die." "Then I die trying," Adrian said. "That is the job, isn't it? We save the ones who can't save themselves." He stumbled toward the technicians. He grabbed a piece of rebar, jamming it under the beam to create a lever. He strained his veins, popping his face, turning red, but the beam barely moved. It was a ton of reinforced plasteel. "Come on," Adrian roared at the beam, pouring every ounce of his frustration, his grief, and his stubborn human refusal to accept physics into the effort. He was weak. He was small. He was painfully human. And to Sable, looking at him in the chaotic, flickering light of a dying station, he was the most powerful thing she had ever seen. She made her choice. She turned her back on Malachi's escape route. Sable sprinted to Adrian's side. She didn't use a lever. She jammed her hands, her Admiral's hands clad in torn white gloves, under the beam. "On 3, she snarled, baring her fangs. 1, Adrian grunted. 2. 3. They lifted together. The biolink flared, sinking their nervous systems. Adrian's adrenaline fed Sable's muscles. Sable's strength reinforced Adrian's spine. It was a perfect feedback loop of survival. With a screech of metal, the beam lifted 6 inches. "Move!" Sable roared at the technicians. They scrambled out, terrified and weeping, dragging their injured colleague. As the last tail cleared the trap, Sable and Adrian let go. The beam crashed down, shattering the floor where the technicians had been seconds ago. "Move, move, move." Owen Hart was at the doorway, waving them through. He had stayed behind, holding the airlock open, refusing to leave his son. They sprinted through the connecting tube just as the atrium depressurized. The blast door slammed shut behind them, sealing off the vacuum. They collapsed on the deck of the Voidstalker's docking bay. Adrian lay on his back, gasping for air, staring up at the ceiling. His body felt like it had been run over by a hauler, but his heart was beating with a steady, triumphant rhythm. Sable sat beside him, wiping the blood from her face. She looked down at him. The cold, political mask was gone completely. In its place was something raw, confused, and profoundly respectful. "You let the Archon go," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a question. "He is just one man," Adrian whispered. "They were 4 people." "That is bad math, Adrian Hart," Sable said softly. "Strategically unsound." "Yeah, well," Adrian coughed, managing a lopsided grin. "I never was good at math. I was a psychology major." Sable looked at the closed airlock, then back at him. She reached out and touched his cheek, her claws fully sheathed. "You are a fool," she purred. "But you are my fool." The ship shuddered as the engines engaged. "Get us out of here," Owen shouted from the cockpit. "Maximum thrust." The Voidstalker peeled away from the perihelion station. On the main view screen, they watched as the glass chapel, the symbol of the fragile peace, tilted and fell. It descended slowly into the sapphire atmosphere of the star. It didn't burn immediately. It sparkled, a diamond falling into a fire before disintegrating into a cloud of silica vapor. "Incoming transmission," Piper called out from the comm station. Her voice was uncharacteristically serious. "Wideband frequency. It is him." Audio crackled over the speakers. Malachi's voice was filled with static broadcasting from his stealth shuttle, already halfway to the warp gate. "You think you have won," Malachi laughed, a sound devoid of mirth. "You have saved a few lives. You have exposed a few secrets. But you have broken the seal." On the screen, the data streams from the lattice shrine, still floating in the distance, were turning red. "The shrine is awake," Malachi continued, "and without the fang mark to guide it, it will default to its primary protocol: defense, purification. The stampede has begun," the transmission hissed. "The seal is loose, Admiral. Even if you catch me, the war has its own momentum now. It will find a reason to be born. Sleep well." The signal cut. Silence filled the bridge of the Voidstalker. Dr. Celine Park walked over to the sensor station. She adjusted her glasses, her face pale. "He is right," she said quietly. "The energy readings from the shrine are spiking. It is not broadcasting a distress signal anymore." "What is it broadcasting?" Owen asked. Celine looked at the screen. "Targeting data." Adrian sat up, leaning against Sable's legs for support. He felt the cold dread seeping back in, but this time it was different. He felt Sable's hand resting on his shoulder. It was heavy, warm, and solid. "Then we have work to do," Adrian said. Sable nodded. She stood up, pulling Adrian to his feet. She didn't let go of his arm. "Set a course for the Lattice Shrine," Admiral Sable Revell commanded. "We are going to finish this. The human way." "Which way is that, ma'am?" the helmsman asked. Sable looked at Adrian, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "The stubborn way." The Lattice Shrine did not look like a building. It looked like the calcified ribcage of a leviathan that had died eating a star. Suspended in the absolute zero of the void, the ancient structure glowed with a pale, sickly luminescence. It was a chaotic mesh of crystalline spires and dark, non-reflective metal that defied the sleek, curved aesthetics of the Felid Imperium and the blocky utilitarianism of the Terran Coalition. It was pre-Empire. It was alien in the truest sense of the word, something built by hands that had fewer fingers and minds that dreamed in different geometries. The Voidstalker drifted toward it, its engines running on a silent, low-emission burn. Inside the shuttle bay, the air was thick with the scent of hydraulic fluid and nervous sweat. The boarding party was small. It had to be. A large force would trigger the shrine's automated defenses, which according to the scanners were currently charging up enough energy to vaporize a moon. Adrian Hart stood by the airlock. He checked the seal on his vac suit gloves. His hands were steady, which surprised him. 5 days ago he had been a cadet, worrying about failing his xenopsychology midterms. Now, he was preparing to storm a temple of doom to stop an interstellar war. A hand rested on his shoulder. It was heavy-gloved and familiar. "You are projecting again," Admiral Sable Revell said. Adrian looked at her. She was not wearing her ceremonial whites today. She was dressed in tactical combat armor, matte black, scuffed from the escape at perihelion. Her helmet was under her arm, revealing the fatigue etched into her features, but her golden eyes were clear. "I am not projecting fear," Adrian corrected her, checking the charge on his stun pulse rifle. "I am projecting annoyance. I really wanted to graduate this year." Sable made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "If we survive the next hour, I will write you a letter of recommendation. I believe saved the galaxy from a genocidal warlord counts for extra credit." She reached out and took his hand. It was not the grip of a captor dragging a prisoner. It was not the desperate clutch of two people afraid to die. It was a firm, interlocking grip of equals. The fang mark on Adrian's neck throbbed not with pain, but with a warm, steady resonance. It felt less like a chain and more like a dedicated comms line. Jax Morrow, who was busy welding a secondary power cell to a heavy medical crate, looked up at them. He lifted his welding goggles, leaving raccoon-like circles of clean skin on his soot-stained face. "You two are doing it again," Jax said, shaking his head. "Doing what?" Adrian asked. "The spooky mind-meld eye contact thing," Jax said. "Also the hand-holding. You said we were going to rescue your sister. Why does it look like you are taking the cat for a walk at the end of the world?" "It is called multitasking, Jax," Adrian said dryly. "And she is not a cat. She is an admiral. Show some respect, or she will have you court-martialed." "I will settle for biting him," Sable murmured. "Please do not," Piper Wren chirped from behind the medical crate. The small bioengineer was checking a complex array of life support tubes inside the container. "My medical supply is low, and human mechanics taste like grease and bad decisions." The airlock cycled. The red warning light spun, turning the room into a strobing nightmare. "Listen to me," Dr. Celine Parks said, stepping into the center of the group. She held a portable sensor array that was screaming with data. "The shrine is not just a building. It is a psycho-reactive engine. It was built by the Digwan to stabilize the psychic potential of their species. It amplifies emotion, It locks onto the strongest signal it can find and broadcasts it across the subspace network. She looked at Adrian, her expression grim. Archon Malachi has broken the safety locks. The shrine is currently looking for a signal. If he feeds it hate, pure distilled xenophobic rage, it will amplify that signal 1,000,000,000 times. It will not just broadcast propaganda. It will hit the limbic system of every felid and human in the sector. It will turn fear into frenzy. We will tear each other apart before the diplomats can even utter the word ceasefire. So we turn it off, Owen Hart said, racking the slide of his shotgun. He stood like a boulder, immovable and grim. We cannot just turn it off, Celine warned. The system is already active. It needs a counter-signal. It needs balance. If you just pull the plug, the feedback energy will detonate the sun. Great, Adrian muttered. So we have to talk the machine down from a panic attack. Essentially, yes, Celine nodded. And we have to do it while the Archon is trying to kill us. The airlock hissed open, revealing the dark umbilical corridor connecting the ship to the shrine. Move out, Sable commanded. They moved into the belly of the beast. The interior of the lattice shrine was a cathedral of silence. There was no gravity plating here. They moved using magnetic boots, clanking softly against the floor that seemed to be made of spun obsidian. The walls were lined with thousands of alcoves, each containing a dormant crystal that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light. Thump, thump, thump. The rhythm was everywhere. It was in the lights. It was in the vibration of the floor. It was in Adrian's head. It is getting louder, Adrian whispered, pressing a hand to his temple. I hear it too, Sable said, her ears swiveled forward. It sounds angry. They reached the central chamber. It was a vast spherical hollow, large enough to house a destroyer. In the center, suspended by beams of solid light, was the core. It looked like a heart. A massive mechanical heart made of shifting geometric plates, glowing with a furious red light. And standing on a platform beneath it, looking like a priest of the apocalypse, was Archon Malachi Rook. He was not alone. He was surrounded by his elite Praetorian Guard, 6 towering felid warriors, in gold-trimmed armor. But they looked wrong. Their eyes were glazed, their movements jerky. "Welcome!" Malachi's voice echoed, amplified by the shrine itself. "I was wondering when you would bring me the key." Sable stepped forward, raising her rifle. "Surrender, Malachi. The fleet knows what you are. Your coup is over." "My coup has barely begun," Malachi smiled. It was a terrible expression, devoid of sanity. "You think this is about politics, Admiral? You think this is about borders? This is about biology. It is about the purity of the predator." He gestured to the core above him. "Do you hear it?" Malachi asked softly. "The song, 'I Hear a Broken Machine,'" Adrian shouted, stepping up beside Sable. "And I hear a coward hiding behind ancient magic because he is too afraid to fight his own battles." Malachi laughed. "A coward, no little human. I am an artist. I found the raw material for a masterpiece." He pressed a command rune on the console before him. The plates of the core shifted. They slid open like the petals of a metal flower. Adrian dropped his rifle. Inside, the core suspended in a translucent suspension fluid, was a human woman. Wires and neural shunts were drilled directly into her skull and spine. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, but the face was unmistakable. "Mara!" Adrian choked out. She was not dead. Her eyes were open, but they were not seeing. They were rolling wildly, filled with a chaotic storm of white light. Her mouth was open in a silent scream. "She is alive," Malachi said, savoring the horror on Adrian's face. "Or rather, her consciousness is." The Diguan tech required a biological component to bridge the gap between the digital and the psychic. A resonator. I needed something emotional, something volatile. "And what is more volatile than a human, you monster?" Owen Hart roared, raising his shotgun. "Ah, Malachi wagged a finger. "She is the CPU commander. You shoot me, I might die. You shoot the core, she dies. And if she dies violently, the psychic shockwave will fry the brain of everyone in this room." Adrian fell to his knees. The sound in his head, the thump-thump of the jazz rhythm, was screaming now. It wasn't a code. It was her. It was Mara, trapped in an infinite loop of pain, being used to broadcast hate. "She has been whispering to you, hasn't she?" Malachi walked to the edge of the platform. The echo dreams, that was her, reaching out, begging for release. He looked at Sable. "And that is why I need you, Admiral. You and your pet, the Fang Mark. It is a bonded pair resonance. It is the only thing strong enough to unlock the final limiter. I have the battery, your sister. Now I need the key, your bond. Give it to me, and I will let you live to see the new world." "And if we refuse?" Sable asked, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Then I will crank the input until her mind shatters," Malachi shrugged. "It will be messy, but it will still start the war." Suddenly, a voice cut through Adrian's mind. It was not the gentle whisper he had heard before. It was a jagged shard of glass. Adrian. It was Mara, but it was distorted, corrupted by years of torture and integration with the alien machine. "Hurt them. Adrian, burn it all, make it stop." The sheer volume of her pain hit him like a physical blow. He gasped, clutching his head. "Kill him, kill them all, I want them to burn. She wants revenge," Malachi said, watching Adrian with glee. "She is perfect, isn't she? Pure, unadulterated hatred. Give in to it, Adrian. Do what she wants. Shoot me. Shoot the machine. Let the hate flow. That is what the shrine wants." This was the trap. If Adrian fought, if he attacked in anger, he would feed the shrine exactly the frequency it needed to trigger the pulse. He would become the weapon. Adrian, Sable's voice, was a lifeline in the storm. She wasn't looking at Malachi. She was looking at him. "Do not listen to the machine. Listen to me." "She is in pain," Adrian wept. "She wants me to kill him." "That is not her," Sable said, holstering her weapon. She knelt in front of him, blocking his view of the Archon. "That is the pain talking. That is the reflection. Look at me." Adrian looked up. "You refuse the bet," Sable said intensely. "Remember, you refuse to turn a life into a game. You refuse to let hate win. Do not start now." "But how do I save her?" Adrian whispered. "I cannot cut her out." "We do not cut," Piper's voice came over the comms, shaky but determined. "We copy-paste. I have the biohusk ready. It is a clone body, blank slate. If we can pull her consciousness out of the core and into the husk, we can save her." "The stream is too strong," Dr. Celine warned. "Her mind is scattered across the whole network. You would need a massive gravitational anchor to pull it all back together." Sable took off her gloves. She placed her bare hands on Adrian's cheeks. Her claws extended slightly, pricking his skin, just enough to draw a single drop of blood. "I am the anchor," Sable said. Adrian's eyes widened. "No, the feedback will kill you. It will burn your mind out." "I am an Admiral of the Felid Imperium," Sable smiled a fierce, terrifying, beautiful smile. "I have held the line against armadas. I can hold the line against a ghost." She leaned her forehead against his. "You are the guide, Adrian. You know her frequency. You know the jazz. I will be the ground. Pass the energy through me, all of it." "It will hurt," Adrian warned. "I know," Sable whispered. "Do it." Adrian closed his eyes. He didn't reach for a weapon. He reached for the bond. He visualized the fang mark, not as a scar, but as a bridge. He opened the floodgates of his mind. Mara, he projected. Listen to the beat. Burn pain dark. No, Adrian pushed back, not with anger, but with memory. Not burn. Blue and green. Fourth bar. The piano fill. Listen. He tapped the rhythm against Sable's mental shields. Thump. Thump thump. Malachi realized what was happening. "Stop them, kill them," the Praetorian guards charged. "Defend the connection," Owen Hart roared. He and Jax opened fire. Shotgun blasts and plasma bolts filled the air. Owen was a one-man fortress, standing between his son and the oncoming wall of fur and armor. Jax was throwing every tool he had: wrenches, flashbangs, insults. "Come get some, you oversized rugs!" Jax screamed, firing his welding torch like a flamethrower. On the floor, Adrian and Sable were motionless in the center of the chaos. The energy from the core began to arc. Red lightning jumped from the machine, striking Adrian. But it didn't fry him. It passed through him, turned blue, as it hit the fang mark and flowed into Sable. Sable screamed. It was a silent scream, locked behind her gritted teeth. Her body seized up, every muscle rigid. The sheer weight of Mara's trauma, the years of torture, the alien data, it was all pouring into her. "It's too heavy," Adrian thought, panic rising. "I'm killing her." "Keep going," Sable's voice echoed in his head, faint but iron hard. "I have 4 paws, I can carry it." Adrian focused. He dove deep into the digital storm. He found the spark of his sister, the real Mara, buried under layers of red static. "Mara, it's time to go home." He grabbed the spark. He pulled. Sable arched her back, blood running from her nose. The air around them began to distort. The shrine shrieked, a sound of metal tearing. "No!" Malachi screamed. He saw the red light in the core fading, turning to a soft, confused white. "You are ruining it." He aimed his pistol at Adrian's head. "Goodbye, hero." Bang! The shot rang out. But Adrian didn't fall. Malachi looked down. A red flower was blooming on his own chest. He staggered back, dropping his gun. Owen Hart stood 10 meters away, smoke drifting from the barrel of his shotgun. His face was a mask of cold paternal judgment. "You do not touch my children," Owen said. "And you do not interrupt the music." Malachi fell to his knees. He looked up at the core one last time. The red light was gone. With a final, thunderous crack, the crystal sarcophagus holding Mara shattered. The fluid rushed out, washing over the platform. "Now!" Adrian shouted. "Piper!" Piper slammed a plunger on the medical crate. "Transfer initiated, catching the soul in 3, 2, 1. Sable collapsed. Adrian caught her, falling back onto the hard floor. The connection snapped shut. Silence returned to the chamber. The thump-thump was gone. The angry red glow was gone. "Did we?" Adrian gasped, wiping sweat and blood from his eyes. "Vital signs stable," Piper yelled, dancing a jig around the medical crate. "Brain activity detected in the husk. She is in the box. We have a sister." Adrian buried his face in Sable's neck. She was breathing. Shallow, ragged breaths, but she was alive. "We did it," he whispered. Sable opened one eye. The gold was dim but present. "Never," she wheezed. "Never ask me to listen to jazz again." The aftermath was not a battle. It was a reckoning. The shrine, now purged of the hate frequency, reverted to its default setting. The essence mirror activated. But instead of broadcasting a command to kill it, broadcasted the last 5 minutes of the confrontation. Every ship in the sector, human and Felid, saw the Archon ranting. They saw him admit to using a human battery. They saw him shoot his own people. And they saw a human and a Felid holding hands to stop the apocalypse. The fighting stopped. Not because of a treaty, but because of shame. When the coalition boarding teams arrived to secure the shrine, they found Malachi Rook sitting against the console, clutching his chest wound. He was still alive thanks to his armor, but he looked defeated. Dr. Celine Park stood over him. She adjusted her glasses. "You wanted to show the universe the truth, Archon," she said calmly. "You succeeded." "History will vindicate me," Malachi rasped, spitting blood. "Peace is a lie." "Peace is work," Celine corrected him. "War is the lie. It is the lie lazy men tell themselves when they are tired of talking." She turned to the guards. "Take him, and get him a medic. We do not let monsters die comfortably. He stands trial for every second of pain he caused." 2 weeks later, the medical bay of the Void Stalker was quiet. The hum of the engines was a soothing lullaby. Adrian sat by the biobed. Mara was sleeping. She looked different. Her new body was generic, a standard medical clone template. But Piper had managed to tweak the hair color to match her original dark brown. She opened her eyes. They were clear. The red static was gone. "Adrian," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, unused. "I am here, Mara," Adrian said, taking her hand. "I had a really long nightmare," she said. "There was a cat and a lot of bad music." "Yeah," Adrian smiled, tears stinging his eyes. "But you woke up." She squeezed his hand. It was weak, but it was there. She would need years of therapy. She would never be the same pilot she was. But she was Mara, and she was home. Adrian stayed until she drifted back to sleep, then walked out into the corridor. Sable was waiting for him. She was wearing a simple civilian tunic, something he had never seen her in. Her neck was bare. The collar of her uniform was gone. "How is she?" Sable asked. "She is asking for real food," Adrian said. "I think that is a good sign." Sable nodded. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data slate. She handed it to him. "What is this? Legal dissolvement papers," Sable said. "I filed them with the High Council this morning. The emergency bond status is revoked. The Fang mark is no longer a sign of ownership. Legally, you are a free agent, Adrian Hart. You can go back to Earth. Finish your degree." Adrian looked at the slate. Then he looked at the mark on his neck. It had faded to a silvery scar shaped like a starburst. "And the biological link?" Adrian asked. "Piper says it will fade over time," Sable said, looking at the floor. "Without the legal reinforcement and the constant proximity, the resonance will quiet down. In a year, I will just be a memory." "A memory," Adrian repeated. "Yes," Sable said. "You have your life back. You won." Adrian looked at the woman who had bitten him, kidnapped him, fought for him, and nearly died for his sister. He thought about the silence of his apartment on Earth. He thought about the cold, professional distance of the academy. Then he thought about the feeling of her hand lifting that beam, the feeling of her mind holding him when the universe was screaming. He tapped the delete button on the slate. Sable's head snapped up. "What are you doing? That was an official decree." "I refuse the decree," Adrian said. "You cannot just refuse a High Council decree." "I have a track record of refusing things I do not like." Adrian stepped closer. "I refused a bet once. Best decision I ever made." Sable stared at him. Her tail gave a traitorous, hopeful twitch. "Adrian," she warned, "you are free. Go home." "I am home," Adrian said. He reached out and took her hand. "The bond goes both ways, Sable. You said it yourself. It's a lens. I don't want to break the lens. I like how the world looks through it." Sable looked at their joined hands. She let out a long breath, her shoulders relaxing. A low, rumbling purr started in her chest, a sound she had never let him hear when they were enemies. "You are a stubborn, irrational primate," she whispered. "And you are a terrifying control-freak predator," Adrian replied, leaning in. "I still haven't paid Jax that 500 credits," she murmured. "Don't," Adrian smiled. "Let him suffer." "So," Sable tilted her head, her golden eyes sparkling with mischief. "The bet was 300 credits for a kiss on the cheek. What is the current market rate for indefinite partnership?" "Negotiable," Adrian said. "But it definitely involves you eating something other than synth tuna." Sable laughed. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. "Deal." Outside the viewport, the stars of the Gemini sector burned steady and bright. The war was over. The scars remained. But as Adrian stood there hand in hand with the alien who had once been his nightmare, he realized that the universe had a strange sense of humor. It had taken a war to teach them how to fight, but it had taken a monster to teach them how to be human. And Adrian thought, as he kissed the Admiral properly this time, he wouldn't have it any other way.